The year 2014. The season fall. You turn on Cartoon Network at around 8 p.m. and you see this delightful little guy with a teapot on his head singing about potatoes and molasses. You chuckle and your interest is piqued enough for you to stick around for the next episode. Except this one takes place mainly in a tavern, albeit one where everyone is very keen on musical numbers. People start singing about Highwaymen and the Beast, and since you came in at episode 3, you can't really make heads or tails of it, at least not now. When this happened to me, when I saw this episode, episode 4, little did I know that this episode was probably the most important in the whole series for understanding the plot, themes, and symbolism of the show. It may not be the most important plot-wise or quality-wise, but it basically gives the viewer the keys to understanding what's going on behind the scenes. One might even say, under the surface of the show. It should go without saying that almost as soon as I laid eyes on it 10 years ago, I was enraptured. Not only for its beautiful soundtrack, excellent writing, or masterful animation, but because of something that I couldn't quite put my finger on at the time. The timeless themes conveyed spoke to me in a language beyond mere words. Later on, I would realize it spoke to me in the language of symbols, of allegory, and of myth. Indeed, Over the Garden Wall has deep roots in Western esotericism, psychoanalysis, and comparative mythology. And over the course of the next several minutes, I intend to tell you, dear viewer, how I see Over the Garden Wall. First, a brief update from the future. As I was writing this, I realized that not only do I have much to say for just one video, if I try to put all this in a single video, it could be hours long. It also just makes more sense to split it up into 3 videos based on theme. The 3 main things I will touch on in these videos are tarot, Jungian archetypes, and the hero's journey. This video will focus on how each of the main characters and some of the sub-characters are represented by one of the major arcana of the tarot. Let us begin our journey through the unknown with Wirt. Wirt, I believe, embodies the Fool or Arcana 0 of the tarot. He is our main character, the one we follow for every episode and the character we are meant to see ourselves in. But he is more than a mere vehicle for the audience. He has seemingly a whole life that the viewers are not privy to when we are first introduced. Spoilers for basically the whole series, by the way. This gap in viewer knowledge is represented by his unusual garb. He has on what looks to be a red dunce cap. This, I believe, is a nod to the red ornamentation on the Fool's head in the tarot. Also, both of their cloaks have a red inlay with gold-colored ornamentation on the outside, the flowers on the cloak of the Fool and Wirt's buttons, and both have on a white undershirt. Also on the card we see pictured a white dog. Similarly, we see a mostly white dog in the first episode. Also in this first episode, we catch a glimpse of the recurring theme of water. First, we see Wirt fall into the creek at the end of the fight in the first episode, which mirrors the water on the card. Second, this is also foreshadowing to the twist at the end, that is that they are in the land of the dead from falling in a river in waking life. It is also worth noting here that water, and especially going underwater, is heavily associated with the unconscious in psychoanalysis. Just keep that in the back of your mind for later, and for the next video. On numerous occasions throughout the series, we are told directly that Wirt is adrift. At first figuratively, then literally. Wirt is on a journey of self-discovery, of finding out who he is and who he wants to be, how to overcome obstacles and face his fears, how to enact his will. Likewise, the Fool care is commonly associated with new beginnings or the start of a journey. We can see this reflected in the pose of the Fool, as he is stepping blindly into fate, destined to fall, much in the same way as Wirt and Greg do when they enter the unknown. Now on to Greg, who I believe embodies the Magician or Arcana 2 of the tarot. Also, you'll notice that the order we're introduced to the characters in the show corresponds to the order of the cards in the tarot, Arcana 3 being Beatrice. This pattern sadly breaks down, though, after the first 3, though. Greg's best claim to being the Magician comes from his personality. He is relatively unbothered, and seemingly knows intuitively the right path to take at every turn. Moreover, if you notice, he is the main driver of the plot throughout the majority of the episodes. He had the right idea to make money for the school, he saved Wirt from the dog, he thought to use the bell on Lorna, and he is the main impetus for Wirt to face the beast in the finale. On the card we can see the Magician has one hand raised with a wand and the other pointed down. This is reflected in Greg's pose seen here, and in many other instances throughout the show. But maybe the best textual evidence for this theory is from the last episode where he is collecting the items for the beast. We can see he has wands, stick, pentacles, comb, and cups, cup. But why doesn't he have swords? Swords commonly are associated with the element air in the tarot. Why can't he have air? Because he's underwater. Now on to Beatrice, who I believe embodies the High Priestess, or Arcana 3 of the tarot. In the show, Beatrice acts as a guide for the boys through the unknown, much like her literary counterpart did for Dante in his trip through the underworld. She seemingly knows intuitively where to go, and when asked, she always plays things close to the chest. Likewise, the High Priestess card symbolizes intuition and mystery, but most importantly, the unconscious mind. We can see that both the robes of the High Priestess and Beatrice's bird form are blue, and her dress in the final episode greatly resembles that of the High Priestess. Now onto the Woodsman, whose whole design and vibe just scream hermit to me. We see that both the Woodsman and the hermit are holding lanterns. Both lanterns, on the card and in the show, represent the light of wisdom. In the tarot, it can mean different things depending on the subject, but in the show it represents the light that guides the children on their way back to the known world. We can see that the Woodsman lives alone in his grist mill, and likewise the hermit is conceived of as being alone, much as his name would suggest. We can see that both the hermit and Woodsman have on gray garb. For the hermit it's a cloak, for the Woodsman it's 1800s work clothes. Finally, regarding the overall vibe of the character, the hermit card represents guidance and soul-searching among its other associations. Likewise, we can see in the show the Woodsman acts as a guide for the boys, and is there from the outset to set Wirt on his path to find his true self. Now moving right along to Enoch, the mayor of Pottsfield, who in my eyes pretty obviously represents and is represented by Death or Arcana 13 of the tarot. We can see in the show that Enoch is rather dire and severe. He lays down the law, although not too harshly, with the children, and as they leave he remarks that they will one day join them. Similarly, in the tarot we see death associated with inevitability, as suggested by the armor Death wears in some depictions. This could also correspond to a cat being inside the puppet in the show. Overall, however, death in the tarot symbolizes transition and change. Perhaps the transition into the unknown the boys are undergoing. In the card we can see Death reaping his grim harvest. And similarly in the show we see that Enoch is harvesting skeletons for his dance festival. Another interesting parallel is the cat in the Enoch puppet is riding the puppet much in the same way that Death is riding his pale horse on the card. And lastly, perhaps the most obvious similarity is that Enoch's head looks like a skull. Now in the third episode, sadly, I can't quite pin down what arcana, or even suit in the tarot Miss Langtry represents. Let me know in the comments if you have an idea. But I do think her dad, Mr. Langtry, represents the Emperor card. Not only is it implied Mr. Langtry is the headmaster or at least the patron of the school in episode 3, but in the tarot the Emperor card represents control, stability, authority, and establishment. All traits Mr. Langtry seems to have, if not in spades, at least to some degree. He may not be the most imposing patron, especially without his coat on, but he at least tries to instill some order in the school and secure its funding. On to episode 4 and the Empress, who I believe is represented by the tavern keeper. In the tarot, the Empress is depicted always as a full-figured, motherly type character, representing nurturing and abundance. Not only does the tavern keeper match the physical description of the Empress, but she easily fits the personality description as well. She runs a tavern as her name would suggest, but also worthy of note is that this is the last time in the series the boys can be seen eating food. Real food, not leaves. Yes, they're shown at the table in the next episode, but both boys hardly touch their food. Now we come to the first event instead of character, represented by a major arcana, in the form of the turning point at the end of episode 4, where the boys meet the Woodsman again and erroneously try and subdue him. In chapter 4 near the end, we see that the edelwood tree that the Woodsman was chopping catches ablaze as the children are trying to escape. This scene, at least to me, greatly resembles the Tower card in the tarot. We find out at the end of the episode that the beast is not actually the Woodsman, but instead something altogether much more terrible. Sadly, though, the children don't know this, and instead drastically increase their time wandering in the woods. In chapter 5, we come to the first two characters that are better understood as a pair, Endicott and Marguerite, who I believe are represented by the Sun card and Moon card respectively. The color scheme and lighting in Endicott's mansion is all very bright, and when he and Greg go looking for the ghost, he is shown holding the source of light they use to find their way. In the tarot, the sun represents positivity, happiness, optimism, fun, and warmth. Similarly, we see these traits in Endicott's boisterous personality. Also, the sun is associated with the masculine. Likewise, when Marguerite or her side of the mansion is shown, it's always dimly illumined either by the moon or natural light, often with a bluish hue. Marguerite in the show is shown to be mysterious, ghost-like even. Hence why Quincy believes he is being haunted. Similarly, the moon card is associated with illusions, femininity, and the unconscious mind. This is also a good time to bring up one of the major themes of the show that relates to the tarot. All throughout the show, we see numerous references to the card The Lovers. Quincy and Marguerite, Wirt and Lorna, and of course Wirt and Sarah. Even Wirt and Greg, as strange as it might seem. Bear in mind that the Lovers card only means relationships in the larger sense. Indeed, Aleister Crowley writes, "This is a mystery of the sixth key of the tarot, which ought not to be called the lovers, but the brothers." And indeed, we see that in order for Wirt to start his relationship with Sarah, he must first repair his relationship with Greg. But more than this, he must repair the relationship with himself as well. Numerous times throughout the show he is shown how to love himself, how to be a good brother, how to love in general. But it takes several days in the unknown to really hammer the point home. And as such, we see at the end of the series, Wirt finally comes to appreciate his brother and learns to trust himself and rid himself of self-doubt, which then he uses to pursue Sarah when he makes it out of the unknown. Next, we're on to the second event in the show represented by a major arcana, the riverboat in Chapter 6, which I think is represented by the Chariot card. This may seem shaky at first, but consider just the general visual framing of the boat in the episode. To me at least, the shots where it is shown from the back bear a resemblance to how the chariot is depicted in the tarot. Bonus. In Crowley's deck, the chariot's wheels are prominent, just like the wheel's paddles are prominent in the boat in the show. The meaning of the chariot in the tarot is determination, overcoming obstacles, and ambition. In Episode 6, which is mainly on the boat, we open on our protagonists triumphantly singing about nearly reaching their goal of seeing Adelaide. Additionally, Wirt finally starts to overcome his self-doubt by playing the bassoon in the frog band. And finally, we come to the character that originally stood out to me so much, so greatly resembled his parallel in the tarot, so as to send me down the path that led to me making this video in the first place. I'm talking, of course, of the Beast, who to me clearly is represented by Arcana 15, the Devil. Not only does he have horns and is the main antagonist, but he also is explicitly referred to as the Beast of Eternal Darkness by Adelaide in the show. As we can see on the card, he is served by two witches. These in turn correspond to Adelaide and Auntie Whispers. Luckily, though, in the show, one of them turns out to be good. An argument could also be made that Lorna was the other witch as well. We can see that the devil in the card is holding a torch, while not a lantern. The beast in the show is quite concerned with keeping the lantern lit. This also draws to mind the etymology of the name Lucifer, Luke meaning light and Ifer meaning bringer. Naturally, a bringer of light wouldn't want his light to go out. In the tarot, the devil card represents restriction, attachment, and most importantly, the shadow self. This brings to mind the woodsman's attachment to his daughter that keeps him giving the lantern oil, or how the boys are restricted, unable to exit the unknown until dealing with the beast. We'll say a little more about the beast, but let's save that till the end. The comparisons start to get a little sparse here, just because at this point in the show, we start focusing a lot more on Wirt and his dynamic with Greg and Beatrice. However, one event in the show worthy of note is Episode 8, where Greg wishes on a star, represented by the star card. The only human figure in the card is female, which mirrors how the beast appears to Greg in his vision/dream. The star card represents hope and faith. And in this episode, we see Greg as the only one of the boys not to give up, his faith and hope unbroken by his predicament. Another interesting note is that in this card there is also water, yet another symbol of the unconscious mind, the unknown. Now in Episode 9, strictly speaking, we're not in the esoteric realm per se, that is the unknown. But given how important Sarah is to Wirt, I think it pays trying to pin down what she's represented by. And if I have to wager a guess, I'd say she's represented by the Temperance card. We see both the angel and the Temperance card, and Sarah both have cups/cartons/vessels to carry liquid. This is on top of the fact that both the angel and Sarah are both women. The angel carries two chalices, which could have multiple meanings, Wirt and Greg, Wirt and Sarah, etc. And Sarah has the juice carton with the cups at her graveyard rendezvous. Also shown on the card is a body of water, possibly a parallel to the body of water hidden just off screen, over the literal garden wall in this scene, that the boys fall into to start their whole journey. As for the meaning of the card, the Temperance card is associated with balance, contentment, and peace. All things Wirt needs to find and is striving for throughout the show, much like he is striving for Sarah. At long last, we are at the end of the show, the final confrontation between the beast and our main heroes. an event that I believe is represented by Arcana 20 Judgment. The final showdown Wirt has with the beast can be thought of as a type of judgment. If he does not pass this final test, his soul is forfeit, along with the soul of his brother. Fortunately, he is able to learn from his trials and tribulations in the unknown to outsmart the beast, and in so doing save his soul, his brother's soul, the woodsman's soul, and in theory release the whole unknown from the beast's grip. One interesting thing I notice each time I watch is that the beast never actually physically touches anyone, or at least doesn't do them physical harm. He relies solely on trickery and fear to get the inhabitants of the unknown to do his bidding. Wirt is able to realize this. He realizes the beast has no power that he doesn't give him, and the same goes for the woodsman and everyone else. Because if he did, why would he need so much help? The last thing I'll say on this front is that in the brief glimpse we catch of the beast in the lantern, he is shown to be a composite of faces. To me, these represent all of his past victims. In fact, he might be the collective suffering of all those whose wills failed in the unknown, and who are now wanting people to join them. On the card, the angel Gabriel is shown blowing his horn to signal the end of days, and the dead are shown rising to be judged. Similarly, in the final episode, Wirt and Greg finally leave the land of the dead. One minor note, one could think of the ambulance's sirens as the horns sounding to raise them from the dead. And we've come to the end, the resolution, and a good one at that. And for these reasons, this is where I put Arcana 21, the World. The World card represents ends, resolutions, and the restoration of order. This restoration of order is symbolized by the pan out over the town, but also the revisiting of each character from the unknown, which symbolizes that not only is everything right with the waking world, but everything is set back in order in the symbolic world as well. And there you have it. All of the esoteric associations and arcane parallels my mind could draw while writing this over the course of several weeks. It's been a long time coming. Years, in fact, I just never had the audience until now. And for that, I am truly grateful. I couldn't have made it this far without you all, so as always, thank you for watching. But one last thing before I go, an aperitif for the next video in the series. In all the scenes where the beast is shown, he is always shrouded in shadow. Even in the song in the 4th episode, it starts by casting an ominous shadow on the tavern wall. Not only is this to signify him being an evil or dark entity, but also to signify that his very essence is that of a shadow. Some of you may know what it means already, but all of you will have to wait until the next one to find out for certain. Thanks again and good night.